here we are. Episode 8, right?
Yeah.
Episode 8. We don't know it right now, but we will have known by the time this comes out. Hopefully, anyhow, who the next president of the United States will be. And that's why we covered the election in our last thing. We'll probably have some little clips and stuff of us watching election coverage. I'm getting ready for it like it's the Super Bowl.
I know, I'm ready to party. I want to go on TikTok Live.
Right.
I mean, again, that's all. This is going to air after the fact, so we'll see what happens. But so this week's episode is all about
drugs.
drogas. And I just want to throw this disclaimer out there. We are in no way, shape, or form condoning the illegal use of any drugs.
Yeah, we're not advocating for that. We're just suggesting it.
Exactly. And if you're underage, click out of here right now. I'm going to age restrict this episode.
There's lots of things that, I mean,
a lot of this is educational. For whatever reason, Scott is
it is. We're just learning.
Host of facts and figures.
I've always loved drugs.
He knows a lot about it. He's watched a lot of documentaries.
I've always been fascinated by drugs, interested in drugs. You learn about the things you like. That's just all there is to it. No, but I've always, because we grew up in the golden age of drug information.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
No generation before us had the access to the information that, most people had never even heard of half the drugs that were out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
You had very select few people, a lot of the pioneers of modern drugs, especially your psychedelics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that stuff was just pioneered, in the last 70 to 80 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is all a new frontier, really, in the course of human history, as far as, where we're at now with drugs. Drugs have always been a part of human history. As long as there's been humans. So Marcus Aurelius, we know, was a opium addict.
Right.
And that was, what? A long freaking time.
time.
Thousands and thousands of years ago, the Roman Empire.
Right.
And, people had long used... The two biggest ones are because they're just the most natural, the plants, in terms of just in their straight form of being weed and opium.
Right.
Because, they're ready to use. You don't have to do nothing to them. You don't have to, you know what I mean?
Farm to table.
Farm to table, baby. And so people have been using them. Well, they actually estimate so we know that people were ingesting poppies through archaeological evidence and stuff.
Okay.
But we even guess that even the use of opium poppies predates humanity, and that some of the early human ancestors were eating opium long before. You know what I mean? We're talking 100. Who knows?
Wow.
Neanderthals, stuff like that. We have evidence.
When was The Wizard of Oz written? I
the
know
1940s.
Right, but even in the 1940s,
right.
They wrote it into Frank L. Baum, or whatever his name is, wrote it into this storyline.
Opium is probably the most, like I said, that and cannabis are the two biggest. And actually, because the Romans, we found a lot of evidence they love weed, but the reason that they loved it the most is they loved to fry and eat its seeds. The seeds.
Fried weed seeds.
The Romans loved it. It was a big thing with them. They loved it, ate it up. It was a delicacy.
Is anybody doing this in the legal use states? Well, let me know.
But I'm just saying, you might be able to, if you owned an Italian restaurant, I'd give it a go.
Fried weed seeds.
I
like seeds. I like.
They say something real fancy in Italian, and we're bringing a dish. We're bringing a dish with a fried weed seed.
How is it that we're talking about drogas right now, and you lead right into food?
Well, if they're eating weed seed, because that's just what I do. It's a crossover of the two things that I love the most. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, 2 of my top 10 probably.
And if you guys are wondering why I'm saying it that way, I'm not trying to hide the word. I mean, it is what it is. If this episode gets banned off of any search,
right? I mean, it is what it is. You'll be able to find it somewhere. I mean, you can talk about it on a podcast.
No,
Our
but I
podcast
say
we
that-
can talk about it, but if it would get banned on a specific platform, meaning like one in particular,
right?
Just because of the talk of drugs, it's whatever. Who cares? You know where else to find it. So
right, exactly. But regardless of that, the reason why I say it that way is because I just have a weird way of saying certain words, and once I do it like once or twice, like I said that a couple episodes ago, and ever since I said it, like I can't unsay it.
You can't unsay it. You can't say it any other way.
Right? Go like this.
It's kind of like saying, I don't know. I can't think of anything, but so drugs have always been a part of humanity, like a part of human history, and
just like everything else, once it makes its way to America, it becomes puritanly inhumane to do it.
Well, I think that the biggest. So what we know is that, I mean, like I said, humans obviously have a long history with drugs, but there was no real drug regulations until, at least in the U.S., until like the 1920s. The Harrison Tax Act,
right, is the
first time that there's any kind of thing on the books about making drugs illegal. I mean, drugs were here, but then you saw other, legislation come into play. And then of course, with the advent of like the Drug Enforcement Agency and stuff like that throughout
another money laundering firm in the U.S.
Yeah, it's all it is. That's exactly right. It's just a way to fight another endless war.
Right.
And pump money into police departments and schools and everything else. It's just a total money racket. That's what the whole thing's a money racket. They're making money coming and going. The drug people are making money. They're probably involved in that. They would have to be. To run a transnational criminal organization, you have to have some kind of government connections at some link in the chain. You know what I mean? Like there has to be somebody turning a blind eye.
Enough movies, documentaries, and TV shows to know that if they say it enough, it's really happening behind the scenes.
Well, I think it was somebody that said that if you took like the drug economy and it was a legal like enterprise, it would be as big as oil.
Right.
You know, it's the biggest industry in the world. It touches every continent, every country, every household, really. And I don't mean that every single household uses drugs, but everybody knows somebody that has some kind of connection to drugs.
Right.
Whether that be a family member that died of an overdose or their brother that smokes weed at
Thanksgiving. And that's the thing
or alcohol.
Exactly.
Everybody.
I mean, if we're not talking about addiction per se wholly in this episode, like it's not all about addiction, but I mean, food, sugar-laden foods and processed foods could technically be considered a drug because they impact your receptors in some of the same ways.
I mean, sure, yeah, if you even want to expand it that far, for sure.
I don't, but I'm just saying.
But right. No, and that's what...
food addiction.
Right. Well, addiction's a whole different thing aside from drugs.
Right.
You could spend another episode talking about addiction of drugs and then another episode of addiction of other things.
Right.
Like that's such a heavy beat. Like there's so much that goes with that.
Right. And I like to keep the episodes on the lighthearted side. So while there will be some like heavier discussions in this episode, I like to have a whole episode just on addiction itself. That we could make it funny. I mean, I'm sure we could.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, I'm saying we could do an episode on that, but it's not this one because we're just covering drugs stuff about drugs.
I mean, because think of the age we live in right now, though, and how just in our lifetime, I don't even know what it's called. The shift of attitude
towards drugs and especially like what now with the legalization of marijuana in a lot of states, hopefully the whole country here soon, just to clear things up. But then you have other places that are going like even further than that and saying You can mushrooms, other psychedelics. You know what I mean? That you could do. That they're legalized.
Mushrooms.
And I mean, they're using drugs now for a lot of therapeutic reasons that they have in other, they talk about like the ketamine and MDMA being used to treat PTSD. There's a lot of, research being done around the world that sort of points in that direction. Then you look at it from the therapeutic standpoint as well. You look at things like ayahuasca, or people that go in these like spiritual retreats, or do the 5-MeO DMT, whatever, the frogs, the bufo frogs or whatever they're called.
Right.
That's like a whole one, and that's just it's all related. All that stuff's related to DMT. But they can synthetically make that thing on the frogs. They don't want you getting the frogs because the frogs are endangered. It's only like the northern Colorado river frog or something that does. You can do it, and there's a whole. Go watch it, Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. He was really up to date on that.
Yeah, that show is fascinating.
Well, see, to me, that's like one of my favorite shows of all time because it's literally how, if you have a curiosity about learning about drugs, how they work, where they come from.
It's very educational. It removes a lot of the emotion out of it.
Yeah, there's really no bias in the sense of he's not coming at it like drugs are bad, drugs are good.
Right.
It's just
science.
What it is.
Right, it's just the science behind it.
He goes to find the people that like first made meth and ecstasy, and like these people were real chemical pioneers that were like persecuted by the government then. And I support him because
and
that research is important.
I think we've talked about it in other episodes, and I also did a TikTok on it when I was a baby TikToker, so it's a really bad video. Poor lighting. But regardless of that, when my son died, I used mushrooms. We did a trip together, and that basically, it didn't cure me. That's a weird word to say.
No, it just
kind of
helps you.
like it snapped me out of a fog and gave me like a renewed hope for life that I don't think I would have had just trying to do it with chemicals from the farm.
What psychedelics allow you to do is take a step back from the situation and view it from a perspective that you're previously unable to see it from.
Right.
And then once you've made that realization, you know what I mean, or seen that from that new perspective, then you can process it from a different way, and then it's like that's what allows you to like, move on or whatever you want to say. Right,
and that was one of the more therapeutic ones. But I mean, I've done so many fun trips too. I might have had one bad one when I was a lot younger, and I couldn't even tell you part of taking a mushroom trip is experiencing all the emotions. So you want to kind of feel everything.
I mean, for sure. Like, here's my thing is though, sometimes you don't want to always do that. So you like eat a little bit less.
Right.
You don't always want to go talk to Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, you don't always want to.
Need to.
Yeah, you don't always need to contemplate and understand your place in the universe and everything and all existence. You don't have to do that every time.
No.
Sometimes you just want to laugh a lot and watch SNL reruns.
But you bring up a good point about laughing. I mean, obviously, I live with you and you're a comedian, and we both say funny shit all day, every day. So, like, we do laugh a lot. But I think, I'm not sure what it is about me, whether it's part of my bipolar or my ADHD or being on the spectrum, but I have a very hard time experiencing happiness per se. And it's not that I'm never happy. It's just that I don't know if I've ever really understood it. But the few times that I've felt it, like joy, like pure joy burst through, other than like when my babies were like very, very, very little, was microdosing on the mushroom chocolate, because it was just enough to where I knew I wasn't going to take a trip. So I didn't have that like build up anxiety of where that trip was going to go. I knew, but it was just enough that like you get that wash over feeling of like just
Where you feel good.
Peace and feeling good. And then once, oh, shit.
What did you do?
I stopped the recording. Hold on 1 second. I'll just play it back. Start it again.
Whoa, folks.
I know. And so like once it sets in, then you just have that like that's the closest thing to like joy that I in my adult life I think can experience. And that's not sad. I don't have a sad existence. I mean
an alternate reality.
Hold on. Sorry. I choose not to take chemical, pharmaceutical drugs for any of my mental health issues. That's a choice. So I handle it through self-awareness, marijuana, and every once in a while some good shrooms. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I have no clue what I was gonna say. But yeah, no, but again, I mean that's really putting a positive spin on things. Those are some of the like good drugs. I mean, one could argue that all drugs are good, and that's the weird thing. It's like a dichotomy. Drugs are good and drugs are bad simultaneously. Like anything that's that beneficial can also be harmful. I mean, that's just all there is to it. Because even like, I mean, now we're obviously not talking about like. You know, but like even opiates and stuff that wreaks havoc on society still have a place in society.
Right. It's not like
there's no other painkillers that like, I mean, there is, but we've simulated based on what we know from opiates. They are opiates. They act on the opioid system, even though they may not technically be classified as such.
They're just not derived from the good plant. The one that.
Right. That's the other side of it too, is we obviously we co-evolved with these plants. So our brains, our bodies have receptors to be able to receive these plants and what they have to offer. You know what I mean? Like if we didn't have those things, we wouldn't be able to experience
plants exist for a reason. And I think bringing around to that story the other day, so I was thinking about the word balance. And right as I was thinking the word balance, I slid across the bathroom floor and almost busted my head open, but I didn't. And I was thinking about it for this very episode because I think that's the key takeaway is, you know, all of life has a balance, all of it. Without darkness, there's no light, blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to get down a really philosophical trail today.
Right.
But, I mean, to your point, those things come from nature. They're derived from nature. They exist for a reason. And without the balance and using them properly, you're going to have what we have today, which are epidemics. Right.
Well, then, too, but then there's also a variety of other factors that come into play, various socioeconomic factors, pharma companies, money, capitalism, all comes into play. Like, there's so many factors that cause like what we are experiencing now, what you would say an epidemic, but there's always been epidemic. The only thing that changes is what epidemic you're dealing with in terms of drug use. That you're always dealing with one thing that's causing a problem.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what. It's just there's various other factors that determine what that thing will be that will cause problems.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? And right now it happens to be fentanyl.
Right.
Because we all know this story we all know how opiates got spread across the U.S. You know what I mean? It started with pain pills. This whole big epidemic, people got hooked and they went to heroin. Well, then they quit making heroin. A lot of people don't know this, but there's actually a few countries where it's not like penetrated, especially a lot of Europe. They still get actual heroin from like Turkey and Afghanistan and stuff. Or the Golden Triangle in Asia. And it's still over there. But like the U.S. fentanyl is taking hold because we're all about cheap. And they don't even make, you know what you would have to do to find heroin right now? Actual heroin. You wouldn't even know, but you would have to be some rich celebrity that happens to know somebody that brings it in from Europe.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't be able to go out on the
Even
street.
then, I wouldn't trust it.
No, but I'm just saying, that's not my point, though.
Right.
My point is fentanyl replaced heroin in the United States and Canada and Mexico. So what you had then was, heroin had been around forever. People weren't really dying at all that high clips up until the mid 2000s is when people started dropping like flies, because prior to that you had I'm just going to say, we'll say 8% of heroin addicts that would die of an overdose from 1930 to 2000, we'll say.
Right.
After that, it's like 40 to 60%.
Yeah.
It's astronomical because they replaced the drug.
Absolutely.
And so it's and now you have all these other power players, because China, which is where almost all of those chemicals and stuff come from. This is what I mean by there's all these super drugs are played at an extremely high level. You know what I mean? The utmost of the drug game. This is the highest things of government, the leaders of the countries that make all that. Right,
and it's not a conspiracy. This is well documented. You can go down rabbit holes like the CIA's on.
Yeah, you can go do. I'm not here to argue your case about how the CIA's been involved in drug trafficking since the 1960s.
Right.
We have plenty of times where they're like, "Oh no, we're not doing that." And then you find out 40 years later, "Oh yeah, they were doing that."
Exactly.
So there's no. And it's not like the CIA is dealing drugs. So in some cases, I believe that they were directly involved, but most of the time, it's international politics. It's this country is pitted against this country. We want to support this country, so we're going to shut down this country's drug trade over here so that this country can get more money.
Right.
And you know what I mean? So
it's all orchestrated by the government.
Exactly.
Their hands aren't as
That's where you get into Nicaragua and all that
Exactly.
stuff back in the 80s with cocaine and all that jazz.
Ooh.
There's plenty of TV shows about it. Go watch. But that brings me to my next thing. TV shows, movies.
All of it. Holy shit.
About drugs. Let's keep TV and shows separate from music, though, because that's a different category.
Okay.
So
what do you want to hit first? Well, you said cocaine, so we got to talk about Blow, Scarface.
Right, but let's just start at the beginning, though. When they first start making drug movies. You know what I mean? They've been making movies about drug use. You've seen it in, whether they just mention it as a reference or whatever. But then, when you get into I said earlier about the golden age, you hit the nail on the head right there. I think that really starts with Scarface.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I've probably seen that movie 1,000 times, no lie. Love that movie. And, it's all about the yayo.
Right. It's the movie that really starts it off as far as I don't know, though. When did The French Connection come out? I think later.
No, The French Connection, I feel like it was
because Scarface is 76, right?
You got your iPad right there.
Yeah, Scarface is 76. French Connection, that's a good drug movie.
Yeah, I feel like
we could sit here and name 100 great drug movies. Think of every movie you love that's about drugs or TV show.
Oh, Half-Baked.
Oh my. Pot movies alone are a separate category from pot movies, cocaine movies,
Grandma's Boy. I feel like I have Tourette's of drug movies right now.
No, I know. It's Grandma's Boy, Half-Baked. Fear and Living in Las Vegas.
Ooh, oh my God. Don't take me down that Hunter S. Thompson path. Holy crapola.
The French Connection was out before. But that's not really
Was it 72?
71.
Okay.
But, but I'm just saying it was before Scarface. But Scarface was the first movie where it glorified a drug dealer.
Right.
The other movies aren't. They're trying to bust the bad guys, bringing in the dirty dopers from Montanas. No, but they, you know what I mean. They're very much trying to catch the dirty dopers, or these kids are all whacked out on marijuana, or they're in an LSD trip.
So, what's that one? Oh, Pineapple Express.
Great movie.
See, you like that movie. Me, not so much. I didn't think it was that good. Like, I just didn't love it. I mean, I do. There are parts that I laugh at, and I do love Pineapple Express, the strain. It is really, really good. But as far as the movie goes, like, I would prefer The Night Before.
That's a great drug movie.
It combines two
great
the
drug movie.
genres.
That's a drug movie that people aren't going to think of because it's first off, it's the greatest drug Christmas movie.
Yes,
that there is.
It's a drug Christmas hybrid.
Yeah, it's a drug Christmas hybrid.
Hell yes. But you can't talk about movies around drugs without talking about, what was that one movie that came out in the 50s that...
Reefer Madness.
Reefer Madness.
Well, I was going to say you can't talk about drug movies also without mentioning Cheech and Chong.
Oh,
Who were they were the first people to purposely set out a movie to be like, we're going to show you how fun it is to do drugs.
Yeah. I like, Hunter, but the Fear and Loathing.
And people are going to be like, well, weed's not a drug. Yeah, it is. It's just a good one.
Right, exactly. They're all drugs.
Right.
I mean, because of the way that you use them. If hemp's not a drug.
You were saying about Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh, God. No, I just love that movie. Scares the shit out of me, some of the stuff that he talks about with the adrenochrome and but I do love that movie. Like, I just love it. I'm obsessed with Hunter Thompson.
Well, I love movies that, like, I love the psychedelic stuff because it's like it gets so wild. Like, then when you start to get into the psychedelic world, we talked a little bit about it earlier, DMT. So then you have people that you can do DMT in multiple number of ways, but ayahuasca, of course, is the one way to do DMT. And the crazy thing is people like all report seeing the same things, like these machine elves,
yes,
and like stuff that like, and you start to wonder, like, that's weird, dude, that they're all seeing the same stuff.
It's like you're seeing behind the curtain.
And then you start to think back to like when people are writing religious texts and stuff. What's to say they didn't eat like one of these things?
Exactly.
And that's how it's all spawned. Like, is from the use of various psychedelic
Pearl Jam, peyote
things. Pearl Jam.
Yeah, that's some type of peyote. That's what Pearl Jam is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
See, you learn something new every day, man.
Peyote.
That's what I'm saying. Drugs are everywhere. You don't even realize, too, like, how they infiltrate, like, the language, things that we say. I can't think of, I should have got some specific examples from America's Secret Slang. But, like, prohibition and drugs and alcohol and stuff have given us so much of the slang that we say, like, in day-to-day life. Like, drugs are, you think about how much drugs are a part of our life. If you include alcohol, it's like I said, it's everywhere.
Yeah. I mean,
it's wild how much it's a part of our life. Even they do it.
Rumspringa.
Well, I'm saying nicotine, coffee, all those things are drugs.
Okay.
So they're chemicals that do a certain thing to the brain. And that's what I'm saying. It touches every single person. Every single person.
I was thinking about something. Now I can't remember what it was.
It is the drugs that bind us.
So we can wrap up on the movie piece. Just because there is we could just go on and on.
We could sit here and talk about drug movies all day long.
Just drug movies. I might do a whole episode.
Yeah, comment your favorite drug movie.
Yeah, comment your favorite.
Drop us a line and tell us your favorite drug movie.
But
what's your favorite drug movie?
My favorite drug movie?
Favorite drug movie.
Oh, God.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'd really have to sit here and think about this. I'm going to say my favorite drug movie. It's so tough. There's so many. Because, like, I mean, you're talking about the heavy hitters here.
It was Scarface until I saw
I know,
Blow.
Scarface is up there. I like Blow, but upon rewatching, I still think I like Scarface better. Scarface definitely probably my favorite cocaine movie for sure. There's a lot of good cocaine documentaries, though. Shout out Cocaine Cowboys. Or what's the one? What's the one that I really like? Sal Malguda. Those guys down in Miami.
Yeah,
I love all of it. Dude.
I know what you're talking about. But
all of it's good. The documentaries are good, but I'm gonna stick with Scarface. Is my favorite drug movie. Blow is good.
Yeah,
I do like Blow.
It's on the fence for me, but just because I like. Actually, I lie.
But
let's back that record up because we forgot about. It's not really a drug movie, but it has a serious drug overtone to it.
Pulp Fiction?
Goodfellas.
Oh, for sure. Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily classify that as a drug movie, but like, it's hard to take, it's hard. Show me 10 movies that don't have drugs in them, like, that are like popular movies.
That aren't a Disney movie, let's
yeah,
say.
like not for kids or whatever.
Right.
Like,
so much so, and I said, so when we got married.
Yeah. So the song that I introduced her to that we got was our first dance song was "Do You Feel Me" by Anthony Hamilton, which he wrote for the movie American Gangster with Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, because they wanted to write it in the 70s because they play it when he's at the club in the 70s.
Yeah,
and they
talks about that.
They wanted it to, they used equipment from the 70s.
All of it.
To make it sound like it was a song of the era, and it's a great song.
I love that song.
Yeah, it's a great song.
Every time, as soon as it goes in, I mean, obviously, because it was our first dance, like, I get a little emotional every time I hear it, but it is an amazing song, and Scott actually introduced me to it, and what's really funny and cute and so true about that story is when I listened to it, I was like, oh, if we ever get married, this will be our wedding song. We'd only known each other 2 days at that point. No, I lied. We knew.
It was like 3.
We knew each other for a while, but we were only dating for like 3-4 days when I said that. So, and we did.
Dreams do come true.
Lo and behold, that was in our wedding.
American Gangster.
American Gangsta.
Shout out Denzel Washington. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, no, Anthony Hamilton.
Anthony Hamilton too, but they
Yeah.
couldn't have made the movie without Denzel. Anthony Hamilton would have just been out there singing songs like he always does.
He's good though.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. So there's so many movies that you bring into, because I was thinking like Pulp Fiction I brought up.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
That's not a drug movie per se, but it's got lots of drugs.
I mean, it's one of the craziest drug scenes ever.
Of all time,
time.
That has iconic.
To
be one. Yeah, if you're talking top 10 like drug scenes,
yeah, it's iconic.
Them stabbing Uma Thurman in the heart, trying to bring her back from an overdose, is wild.
Yeah,
that's the first time they ever showed anything like that, like in a movie. You were like, "What the fuck am I watching?"
Yeah, that was insane.
You're like, "What is this?"
And Pulp Fiction is an iconic movie. I mean,
it was nominated for countless Oscars, but yeah, no. Then
what about shows?
That's what I'm saying. You have shows like Narcos, with all its various, iterations.
My favorite drug TV show of all time never is Weeds.
Oh, Weeds! I forgot all about that.
That is like
that is definitely probably
hands down the best show. Like
Nancy Pants.
Nancy Pants, I love her so much.
I was sad when that show ended, though.
No, I know.
Because it was like they became it really was such a good show. It
felt like they were my family.
Yeah, Andy, it really did.
Uncle Andy.
Andy. I could rewatch that. I love Andy.
Yeah.
It's a great show.
It is a great show.
Weeds is up there as one of my top favorite shows of all time.
All time. And I've probably watched the whole series back to, like end to end at least 5 times. At least.
And it's not really about drugs. It's about the inner workings of a family. But drugs just are the backdrop. But you know what I'm saying?
It's all about her selling weed,
but I'm saying, but that's not the driving force of the story.
No, it's
the
about
driving force of the story is the
mom,
relationships that she has to build, and world that she has to navigate and the balance that she has to have to find her way through all that mess.
Right. I mean, it's a really cool narrative on becoming a widow and having to figure out shit to make ends meet.
Right.
Regardless.
And she's just also, eventually it gets like she's just a badass.
Yeah.
She figures it out and she's a badass.
She is a badass. Nancy Botwin, she is my idol. No, she's not my idol.
Who could forget? And then there's been some of the, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? There's been some pretty bad attempts at shows also. Disjointed comes to mind.
Yeah, that was...
It's like, when you're doing weed comedy, it either comes across as super hacky and not funny.
Right, it's so like corny. Like, it's corny.
Or you have to take a sort of different approach. Like, I don't even know what the thing is, but it's like a difficult thing to navigate. It's a fine line to walk.
Right.
Between being like stupid and corny about it.
What was that duo that was funny on there? Dank and Daddy or something?
Dank and Daddy. Hell yeah, that was funny.
Well, Dank's on SNL now.
He was on SNL.
Oh, yeah, for like
He's
a minute.
not anymore. Chris, what was his name? Chris Red or something.
Yeah, Chris Red.
I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Daddy's up to. But that segment though. See, that's the thing, is there was things I liked about
Daddy's
that show.
on that show Ghosts. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
She's one of the basement dwellers.
But
yeah, that was that. It was a good show, but it was a very half-baked, pardon the pun, attempt at doing service to, because Weeds was more of a drama. It was a soap opera, basically.
Right, there was funny parts in it. It was a drama. It was a dramedy.
Yeah, it was a dramedy, but
very much what you would think of in the lines of a lot of other sort of Showtime HBO shows,
right?
Like that are the hour-long dramedies where they're not necessarily.
Well, I think too with Disjointed, they tried to push the whole woke agenda by having her son be half black, and then he was like,
right. There's a lot of things that are just.
He was like, can I just be honest for a second? He wasn't black enough to pull it off. He was like way too white and nerdy for being half black, and I don't care if people think I'm racist for saying that. Like, it didn't give the credit to the character that I think he could have been.
Right, for sure. There was another show I was just thinking about.
I don't know any other shows that tried to do like the whole drug thing.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there is, but. I mean, if you want to talk about shows like that, like Action Bronson.
Watches Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's a great drug show.
That is a great drug.
And they just sit around, smoke weed, and watch Ancient Aliens. I mean. It's fantastic television.
I mean, raise your hand if you've done that before.
Guilty. That's why everybody that likes that show is like, I'm gonna watch Ancient Aliens anyway.
However, because we're gonna go down a whole diatribe on this. Let's talk about drugs and music.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to start by saying that I was one of the atypical 90s college kids that had the poster on my dorm room of, was it the Cypress Hill or it was the Cypress Hill album. It was Cypress Hill album cover was on my wall with the whole, or on my front door at my dorm room with the whole diatribe about the history of marijuana or whatever that was.
Right, yeah, it gives you the whole breakdown. Yeah, like, I never thought when we were in school that, like, weed was ever going to be legal. Like, they talked about it like it might one day be medically available.
Right.
But I never thought that we would be hitting the drive-thru like we're going to fucking McDonald's, picking up our order of 8 vape pens and 2 ounces of weed.
Which I love. I love that we've moved that far into
society,
like, of doing what's right with the plants that God gave us. However, do they have to read our whole order back to us? Because then I feel a little fucking like
they don't do that at every place. So
I feel like a fiend.
But yeah, they just want to make sure that you know what you're getting.
Speaking of which, shout out to Betty Eddies. They won an award last month for being the best.
Probably the best edible that I like.
The best edible I've ever tried.
They're delicious. They're very, very tasty.
And if anybody from my work is listening, I didn't do any of this. It's all made up. I'm just trying to do a podcast. This is all fiction.
But yeah, let's go back to drugs and music.
Yeah, let's hit that.
Because not only do they talk about, I think all music might be about drugs and written on drugs. I'm pretty sure that's like just the way music works.
Yeah.
Like, even the bad drug, they get like strung out on heroin, writing great tunes. Great tunes.
Yeah.
Not everybody.
No.
But some. And some of the best songs of all time are about drugs, were written on drugs, are sung on drugs. Like, drugs and music go hand, that's like peas and carrots.
Right. I mean, you don't have the blues without heroin. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I think you do because they were playing it before that. That came later, but weed, you don't have probably jazz, which then leads to the blues. Weed, I'd say, is a bigger contributor to that. Heroin enters the scene a little later in the late 30s.
Reefer.
But yeah, I mean, but just so many songs talk about weed. I mean, drugs in general. I said weed, but yeah, I mean, marijuana music. That's the most common drug that people, obviously, because it's the most common drug that people talk about. But then, like, so not only do you have music about drugs, written on drugs, and this all occurs like in the 60s, 70s, because they're experimenting with all these drugs. They start to write about them. They're becoming addicted to some of these drugs, so they start to then write about these addictions. But then you enter in the 1980s, you're introduced to a new form of music and rap, where they're talking about selling drugs.
Right.
So, like, then you're even seeing it from a different perspective.
Well, before that, you had the narco corridos.
Well, yeah, narco corridos, which are songs about, you know, Mexican drug bandits, have been around since basically the turn of the last century, and were popular. But that's not like what we're talking popular music in America. Right. So the biggest thing about selling drugs was when rap came out. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, you did have songs about people selling drugs, but they were limited to like one song, you know, like here and there. I just said that because Waiting for the Man comes to mind by one Mr. Lou Reed. Which isn't really about the drug dealer, it's about him waiting on the drug dealer.
Right. Well, whose song is Needle and Spoon?
That's Neil Young.
Yeah.
That's about somebody doing drugs, though.
Right.
It's
I like
about
that song, though.
Yeah, it's about so many of his friends he saw. Because, I mean, heroin claimed a lot of lives throughout music history.
I mean, 27 Club.
So is cocaine, though. Don't get it twisted. A lot of times, what gets them is actually not one or the other.
It's the breakdown of the body from buildup of
Well, no, it's the speedball.
Oh.
That's what got so many of them. Because that's like playing with they say that's like, you know, tempting I've never done a speedball, but I was curious about it. So I asked people, I know, because I'm not a big upper guy, never was, but I asked people, and I asked the guy one time, I said, what's it like to do a speedball? And he's like, ask Jason. So I asked this guy, Jason, this was in prison. I asked this guy, he's like, imagine being shot to the moon at 1,000 miles an hour, and then right when you get there, you land in a soft bed of pillows. And I was like, that's pretty intense. But, because I guess the cocaine hits you first, but now they do, so the new 21st century speedballs is meth and fentanyl. So,
no, thank you, because that sounds like a lot of opportunities for bad chemistry. Like, if it was pure coca and pure heroina, then fine.
Even then, you're playing such a dangerous game because you're just, don't do speed balls.
No, I mean, obviously I'm not, I'm just getting anxiety thinking about that, but
right.
I do love a good upper. I mean, if we're going full on confessional here, I did I tried crack in like the mid-90s.
Yeah, I hate crack.
I mean, I
Crack
tried it a
is
couple
whack.
times, but I didn't really care for it. I tried coke before, and I like the up feeling. I don't like the down feeling.
I also don't like all the stuff that they use in it, like, you know what I mean? Nowadays you don't know, which is basically why I got out of the drug game.
Right.
It's not the only reason I said that. Like, that's it. That's what got me. No, but I have a joke about this, that none of our drugs, like, that's where I'm an old timer. Like, can't we just go back to the good old drugs, coke, crack, smack, and whatever?
Right.
Like, because it's like these new drugs, these, like, where it's like they're just playing games with governments where they're like, oh, it's just one chemical off of this, one chemical off of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have all these things that are made, there's too many opportunities, like you said, for things to go wrong. If I am just smoking a plant or, you know, something like that, there's very little things being done to this thing to use it. But all these processes, you're trusting somebody to be a chemist.
Right.
You're trusting some Mexican in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Right.
With 55-gallon drums, a 1-gallon gas can, a couple chemicals. Right. You're trusting him to make your drug that you're going to put in your body.
Yeah, and fuck that, because I barely trust the people that make my food at the
I don't trust the people that make drugs in a lab.
Right.
Let alone a lab in the middle of the woods.
Right.
All there is to it.
Okay. Now, I mean, are there people who make drugs from scratch that are brilliant?
And trustworthy?
Yes.
The people, there are, yeah, for sure. That's some of the people that, like, Hamilton talks to in his show.
Yeah.
Is these people that are legit chemists that, like, wanted to push the human mind experience forward. True psychonauts. And experiment with these sort of different, you know, 2CB or stuff like that.
That fascinates me, though. I mean, so we watched a documentary one time on how the pharmaceutical drug Ambien was actually helpful to people off-label. Remember?
It was waking people up from, like, comas.
Year-long comas.
This was real and legit. Yeah, like, these people were, like, immobile and they don't even, here's the kicker, they had no clue why it worked.
They don't know why.
They had no idea.
Well, the one gentleman had a stroke and he had aphasia and his tongue didn't work and his jaw didn't work. And after he took the Ambien, within, like, what was it, like 5 to 10 minutes, he was able to speak perfectly.
He hadn't spoken in forever.
And it's just, there's something.
Couldn't speak.
And that's why, like, I'm a huge proponent of going down the rabbit hole and doing the research of what the drugs can do. But again, once they start to synthesize them for commercial gain, I'm fucking tapped out. Like, I don't want any parts of that. I mean, not that I'm a chemist, but I do enough research in all the healthcare stuff to know where there might be, like, studies or whatever. And off-label studies are fascinating, but can we just scale it back to the original ingredients? Maybe that's why we can't cure cancer, because we've added so many chemical additives to whatever the plant was that was originally meant to help with the cure or whatever. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Yeah, that's what this episode's for. This episode is a free-form thought experiment.
And funny enough, we are on no drugs today. Well, I mean, maybe a little weed, but not anything like that would, no hallucinogenics. No eddies, none of that. Just plain old fashioned ditch. Psych. I don't even know what ditch looks like anymore. I haven't know what ditch
I don't even think, that's the thing about, let's talk about since the legalization of weed, the quality, like, you can't even, you'd have to go looking for bad weed. You know what I mean? You buy it at the store. Like, it's not like you even need in a lot of places you don't even need any kind of card. You just gotta be like 18 or whatever, 21 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's that issue of, like, weight, like, weed used to be the worst thing in the world to try to, like, scrounge. You could buy crack on every corner. But when you're trying to get a dime bag on a Friday night, it was like, I'll meet you at the Big Lots in an hour and a half, and then we're going to drive up to the guy's house together. What?
Like, how much of my life, before the state around me legalized, and before the state I live in got medical, it would be a whole 4-hour long process just to get a half ounce to get us through like a week or two. Like, it was insane.
Yeah.
The level of waiting, driving people around, picking up the person and going to another place.
Drug adventures.
And then fucking wondering if they're ever going to come back out with your stuff, which is another. Or giving it to some teenager who you thought you trusted, and then they don't come back for 2 days with your weed. Like, it was insane. Like, my life was just full of anxiety whenever I couldn't buy weed at the store.
Right, because that's a part of the argument for legalization is you introduce all these other criminal elements when you involve all this other escapades to try to get something. You know what I mean? Also, talking about drugs and music, here's a whole other aspect to it. Music that you listen to when you're on drugs.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, music and drugs, it's a symbiotic relationship.
Well, there's two that come to mind. One of them is my favorite thing to do, which I've done like 3 or 4 times, which is to sync up the Pink Floyd.
Ooh.
What is it? The Dark Side of the Moon.
Dark Side of Oz.
Yeah, the Dark Side of Oz, which is starting Pink Floyd with the Wizard of Oz on mute. A lot of people, Gen X, have heard this, but there's a lot of
Tony Rogan. Tony Rogan was talking about this. Joe Rogan and Tony Hinchcliffe were talking about it the one time.
Nice.
Tony Hinchcliffe said that I think he does it once a year or something.
Yeah, it's terrifying how it actually syncs up. I mean, obviously you can watch it not under the influence and it's still equally cool, but if you watch it under the influence, it's just, it's
trippy.
It's real trippy. Real trippy.
Real trippy. It can be scary even.
But, I mean, when I think about music that I want to listen to when I'm like really, really, really high, the Grateful Dead.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, again, talk about a band like that fully embraced their drug
culture.
Their drug love.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
That fully embraced it and like wasn't ashamed or didn't hide it.
Right.
And I mean, they had their problems with it. I mean, Jerry, obviously, I mean, you know, he had a problem with heroin and cocaine, and it killed him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the dark side of it. But, I mean, I think that's a good time. We wanted to talk a little bit about my own personal battle with addiction. Mm-hmm. So I was addicted to heroin for like a lot of years. On and off for a significant period of time. And I mean, we went through it. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, And it's not like I
didn't know coming into the relationship that you had history with drugs.
Right.
Literally the very first night that we ever talked, face to face. I mean, I say face to face. It's not like we talked before that. But the first night that we talked, we were at a party. And I just kind of went to sit away from people because I'm not a crowd person. And there was a lot of people were already drunk when I got there because I got off work late. And I showed up after the party was started. So like, you know, I needed to catch up and I was just sitting kind of away from everyone and you sit down next to me. And what's the first thing you said to me?
You tell better.
So he's like, so a little about me. I'm a recovering heroin addict. Literally the first thing out of his mouth. I'm Scott and I'm a recovering heroin addict. Like we were sitting in an NA meeting.
Which I should be, truth be told, I haven't done any opiates in how long? I don't even know. It's been a long time.
So
the better part of
July of 2017 was the end.
Right. I went to rehab the last time. That's another fun experience, though, is rehab. That's a whole thing in and of itself. Just the funny things that you see in there. I mean, just the craziness. I often say that you go into rehab, like, you either think one of two things. You either think, holy crap, like, I'm nowhere near as bad as these people. Or you're like, oh my God, I need to get my life together. I'm the worst one here. That's when you know you need to change. When you're the worst one at rehab, you got all the worst stories, you've done all the worst things, then you're like, okay, this is probably the time.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, so we were married for about a year, I think, when you relapsed. So we had been together for about 2 years, married for about a year when you relapsed. And I didn't cop on it first. And that's one of the things, obviously, when you're close to it, you don't see it as easily, right? So I didn't cop on it first. And that made me really irritated with myself because I like to think that I can figure shit out easily and that I'm not easily duped, and that I was. So that was really frustrating for me. But there was a lot of wild shit that happened through that too. Like a lot of wild shit.
Because it's like, and then the other side of it too is like, with an addiction to opiates, it's such a physical addiction that it's very hard to break. It has such a hold on you in terms of the physical addiction that even if you want to stop, a lot of times you can't. You're just bound you're like a slave to it.
Right.
Like you can't escape it.
Right.
I mean, you can, but it's like, it's not cut and dry. It's not just, okay, this is it.
Right. And growing up and even into my 30s, I had known a lot of people who I understood were addicted to drugs, but I never like really experienced a drug addiction until you relapsed.
Right.
And so it was new to me and I didn't know what to expect and the further along it went, the more I understood, right, that you would have to hit rock bottom. And that meant me taking my support away, which was a struggle for me because like the person that I fell in love with, I knew had to still be there during that addiction, but I couldn't find him. And it was really weird because I couldn't reconcile in my brain that there were two different beings living in the same body.
Right, which is so weird now because even like talking about it, it feels it's so distant at this point.
It feels
doesn't
like
even
a lifetime
ago.
Yeah.
Because it's just so weird. Like once you get out of that fog, now I like to say that I'm Pennsylvania sober. So it's just icy light and fentanyl for me. None of the hard stuff. No, that's a joke. That's a joke that I do because it's just funny.
It is
because people say California sober and they're like, I smoke weed and drink, and I'm like, well, fuck it, I'm Pennsylvania sober. Icy light and fentanyl. No,
which actually kills when he does it at comedy shows, but
no, it's just funny because it's like, I'm a big proponent because like obviously I still drink, I still do smoke. In this made up character that I'm doing right now. But the thing about it is, it's like, everybody has to find what works for them. Like some people have to go the route of like nothing.
Right.
Like some people have to do whatever. But like it's like talking about rehab, this one shot, cut and dry way of doing things doesn't work. Our treatment like system is so broke down in this country. Like, I argue that rehab is almost pointless because
it is pointless
in the sense of but there has to be a place that people can turn to for help because sometimes you need to be able to deal with the physical aspect of it, and they're able to manage that through drug like Suboxone and stuff like that.
Agree.
That I think is the vital, necessary part. What do they call it? Medically assisted detox. That I believe in wholeheartedly. However, the rehab part, now I'm saying some people do need that counseling. Some people need that talking.
No, not some people. every single person who has an addiction of any kind, and I've said this a million times over, even if you break the addiction, you are not recovered without figuring out the reason why you became addicted to begin with. And not everybody, like, especially with opiates, a lot of people just happen to slip into it through like an injury. Like, I get that, but most people become addicts because they're seeking something that they can't fix.
Right, but my point though is to break the cycle of addiction, you don't necessarily need counseling, and I'm going to tell you why. Because whenever you're meeting all these people, anytime you meet somebody that like quit for good, they all have the same story. I knew this was the last time. I knew this happened, and I never did it again. I knew in my heart that I was never going to do it. I was going to do whatever it takes. You hear this time and time again. So if your mind's made up and you're going to do it, you're going to do it regardless of the circumstances, regardless of whether or not you go to rehab, regardless of whether or not you get treatment, you're going to do it if you have made up your mind to do that. And that's the story that I've heard 1,000 times over. And then for the people that aren't ready, if you try to do it when you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it. Like, if you're not ready, no amount of rehab is ever going to get you to the point where you're ready.
Right.
So it's like, so that again, it goes down to this. So we need a new form of treatment. You know what I mean? Like a new way of approaching it.
Right.
I should say, because like none of that stuff is inherently bad, but because it's become a for-profit system, people make money off of it. They want you to be involved in it every step of the way.
Right. It's like,
but there comes a certain point where most people, you just have to move on. You can't keep dwelling on it or you're only going to keep reliving it.
Right. That's exactly it. No, right. Some people need like the ongoing have to go to NA, and I don't knock that at all.
No,
like,
do what you got to do if that's what you want to do.
Whether it's church-based or whether it's, science-based where you're going to psychology only or whatever the case may be, like do what you need to do to get better. Like I'm all for that.
Right. Do what works for you.
What I'm not for are these fucking broken systems of blowing smoke up people's ass, knowing that the recidivism rate is so high. And still.
Right. It's great. If it works for you, great. It does work for some people. But the problem is it doesn't work for everybody. And there's we don't need a one size fits all approach. We need to incorporate all the different things that work for different people because it's just kind of like the education system. You can't educate people the same way.
Exactly.
And it's a different form of education. You can't get these people better using the same
because again,
techniques.
not everybody is an addict for the same reason.
That's exactly right.
And once you become addicted, until you know that you've absolutely hit rock bottom, or maybe you don't ever want to get there, but to your point, you have to kind of know in your brain that you're done. And how do you get to that point? Not everybody gets there the same way or at the same time.
And everybody that I've talked to, like, experienced the same thing that I experienced. And they experience it in different ways, but they all refer back to one moment where it's like a switch gets flipped. And you know that you at that moment decide that the consequences of you doing whatever are not what you don't want to deal with that any longer. You know what I mean? Like you're tired of dealing with that. And so you know at that moment that you're never going to do that again. You know what I mean? Like your mind is made up. It's like a switch flips and it's done. And everybody that I've talked to talks about that day when they knew. And could it be a battle still after that? Sure. I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'm not saying that just instantly everybody that stopped just stopped one day and that's that. For many people, it's a many years battle, but it's many years battle to get to that moment.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? That moment happens in an instant. And it's isolated, but everybody that I talk to has that moment. So how do you get people to that moment is the question.
I mean, how do you? And I was frustrated with literally every person in our circle because when you were an addict, there were so many people that only wanted to see the good in you, but that good wasn't present.
Right.
A lot of the times in the moment. But So, like, I would cut you off, but then you would find other means through other people of money and, you know, whatever you were doing to get the money for the drugs at the time. It didn't matter what I did or didn't do. Like, that's kind
right,
of
a drug addict is going to find a way, whether or not you, like...
And that was really hard for me because it felt like no matter how normal I tried to make the home, no matter how stable I tried to make the home, that whatever, no matter how much I thought that you loved me, that was really, really hard for me, was to come to grips with the fact that it didn't matter whether you loved me or not.
Right, that all goes out the window. Plenty of people in, you know, that go through that, like, that stuff all goes out the window because you're playing with a different... You're not talking to a normal, sane person at that point.
No, you're not.
You're talking to a brain that's chemically altered. So it's not reacting... It's not processing information the same. It's not receiving information the same way. It's not outputting information the same way. So it's a total breakdown. You're dealing with a separate thing that you're not used to.
Right.
And you can't reason with something like that.
No, you can't. And it took me a long time through trial and error to discover that. And a lot of people ask me, and I think a lot of my friends and family who are close to the situation expect me, like this podcast to, not this specific episode, but expect us to tell that story of, you know, all the deep and dirty details. I wrote a whole book about it. It's sitting in my basement in a tote. I'm very superstitious, and so I never wrote the last chapter because I feel like the last chapter just really isn't written yet. It's there, but the final chapter of the story has to be like the happy ending, and we're there, but I'm afraid to jinx it. You know what I mean? So,
right.
But that's where the dirty details live. But all I'll say about it is that when I was writing the book, I wrote it as if Scott had they were two different people. And you almost, not to throw away the whole plot twist, but you kind of don't know you don't know they're the same person through up until the middle of the book when you realize.
Right. It's a very good, like, I don't know what the word, portrayal.
Yeah.
Very interesting portrayal of a way to display this split of two different people.
Two different people. I mean, it really was. And, I mean, people witnessed me on social media spiral too. So, like, everybody knew through whispers because you didn't really have social media at the time. Everybody knew through whispers that, well, through loudness on my side of the family and whispers on your side of the family, that Scott was going through an addiction. But what people were really seeing was Crystal spiral on social media into
right. You see the effects,
a nut job, like a pure nut job.
How it ripples out through families and all that stuff. So
right.
But
let's. Because I don't want to make this a really sad and sad.
No, I know.
Like I said, the whole story's out there.
Up.
One day I'm going to publish it. But I love your story about when you finally were done, that whole little adventure that you took. But I want to preface that by saying that probably 2 weeks before you were done, we were driving up a mountain, 2-lane highway, Route 40 in Maryland, coming back from Frederick. And I was so done that I tried to steer our vehicle into an oncoming semi. Coming down a 2-lane, the semi was coming down the mountain, and I was going to kill us both because I had just had the shits of the whole thing.
Right.
And I think that was kind of like the catalyst
then
that
it
led into...
Right. Then it blew up, and then it went into the thing, and then I had my moment, which was Jerry Garcia saved my life. Jerry Garcia, my grandma, in heaven, and they saved my life, and that's all there is to it. I was out in the woods. It was a spiritual experience.
By yourself?
Yeah, by myself, crazy, delirious, going through withdrawal, very weird. and like I said, that's what happened.
What'd you have with you? Like a pack of cigarettes,
Oh,
a
I
bottle
don't
of
know.
water, and a bud.
I have no idea. I don't know what I had with me.
It was like nothing.
But yeah, no, I was just in the woods. But yeah, and then I just like had some like, I don't know if you call them hallucinations or whatever, some like visions, and like it would just, but like I knew from that moment on that I was good. Like I wasn't gonna fuck around anymore.
Touch wood, he's been good.
Yeah, no, it's not even a part of I don't even consider it a thing. That's like, it's completely broken that part of whatever. Like, because it's just not a place that I would allow myself to go again. It's just
right.
It's
and
just
like,
not.
So I mean, the healing process afterwards was like speedy too. I'm not going to say, like, obviously over the years, I've definitely had singular meltdowns here and there, but the minute that I saw your personality like back, like I just knew, like I wasn't worried anymore, because I knew at that point we're like 4 or 5 years into an addiction.
And that's the hard part for an addict, because when you know the change is different inside of you, you've shown these people for the last however long that you're a piece of shit, right, that you're not going to follow through on anything that you say or whatever. And then when you know that you're going to, you really don't but like you want to live, because you haven't been living for so long. So like you want to try to get all this stuff like fixed, because it's like you've fucked your life up so much that like you want to scramble to try to put the pieces back together.
Right.
Because it's like you've been in this fog for so long that like then when you come back to it, you're like, gee, you know what I mean? You got this huge messy house that you got to clean up.
Like, where do I start?
Where's the broom? Because this is a mess.
That's exactly it. But I mean, but we did it, and that's it took me a little longer to come around than you would have liked, but I do things on my own time always.
Well, I mean, that's all understandable,
but yeah, I mean, and it wasn't there. The trust, there was a broken trust, but it wasn't like it took forever for us to get the trust back, because most of the trust was my gut feeling about who you were. And again, once I saw that side of your personality was gone, like it was easy for me to trust you. But what I didn't want to do is let you know how easy it was,
right,
because I didn't want you to think that it would be easy to dupe me again, which was like, that's right, the balance that I had to find is, you know, fool me once. What did George Bush say?
Right. But all right, enough of that crap.
Yeah, enough of that crap. So now you guys know that.
Yeah, you know all about that.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's a powerful story, though, babe. I don't want you to poo-poo it. It is you are one. I mean, your story's lucky, because.
No, I consider myself very lucky. I do.
Not everybody comes out of it, and you came out of it right before fentanyl hit. So thankfully, we didn't lose you to that.
Right.
And.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going into all that. I want to get to the funny stuff. So, no, we were talking about like rehab and like funny things.
Oh my God.
Rehab. And just some of the funny stories that like happened to me, like in rehab, some of the various things. I went to New Jersey rehab once and came back with an Italian accent.
Which isn't hard.
I was like, I'm down there eating hoagies and some pizzas, and I went down and got a couple of pies, and you know, hanging out, smoking cigarettes.
I will give you Guido motherfuckers one thing, though. He came back with a better style about him. He cared more about his appearance.
No, but I love that. So, but no, it's just funny. So then you meet, like, the people that, like, you meet the guy that, like, gets a haircut before he goes to rehab. He's like, and that's a real loser. You spot him immediately. Like, this fucking guy had his life together so much that he got his hair cut before he went to rehab. You roll into rehab. I learned this after my first time. The first time that I went to rehab, I was like not high at all. Like I went in, I was already withdrawn, whatever. That's not how you go to rehab. You go to rehab in the middle of a bender. You get dropped off in the middle of the night. You're loaded. You don't even know where you are. That's how you go to rehab. You don't get a fucking haircut. That guy was probably in there for weed or something.
And fresh kicks. Speaking about going to rehab for weed, let's just talk about this because you did know somebody that was in rehab.
Oh my God, there was plenty of people that were in there for weed, and we all laughed at them and made fun of them.
Yeah.
And told them to move on with their lives. But the funniest thing, though, is that people...
That's the start of the whole victimization movement right there. If you're...
Right.
Oh, God. I'm going to punch you in the face if you're in fucking rehab for weed.
Yeah, stop.
Stop it. You're giving weed a bad name.
Yeah, you're giving the people that are in there for real issues, like the people that... Like, I met the people that were, like, hooked on PCP. I once knew a guy that was hooked so bad on crack when he found out they didn't have caffeine at rehab. He broke out of the rehab and walked to town for two liters of Mountain Dew. And come walking back chugging. He was just fucking... He needed the jolt so bad that he just, like, couldn't take it. And he just had to go get some Mountain Dew. Because we're out in the middle of... That's the thing about Pennsylvania rehabs. A lot of these are out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And you're, like, in a cabin in the woods. And there's bears and rivers. And, like, there's no drugs around. And so if people, like, leave... I mean, if you want crack, you're not getting crack. You got to get Mountain Dew. And not moonshine either. Just regular old yellow Mountain Dew.
Make you piss green the next day, Mountain Dew.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, it's you meet some crazy characters at rehab, that's for sure.
But you also meet, like, and I've never been to rehab, but I've been to the psych ward, which is essentially the same. It's the same.
Jail, rehabs.
Yeah, like,
these are all things where you meet characters that you wouldn't otherwise meet.
But
you know what I mean? Like,
it also gives you a deep appreciation for humanity and what people go through. Because I used to have a hard time, like, being around people who I believed were less smart than me until I realized that there's different levels of smart.
Right.
That's when I really became, like, a fan of the human experience, is like meeting people in jail, meeting people in the psych ward, where you're like, shit. Again, to your point, like, I need to get my shit together because I'm not that bad off. I'm just out here pulling off stupid stunts. These people have real deal issues and still are going back at life.
Well, not only that, but then there's plenty of people that I met. I'm like, that's a good dude.
Yeah.
Like, something fucked up happened that they're in wherever you met them, jail, rehab, whatever. Something happened that whatever, but, like, you're like, that's a good dude, just got a bad break or whatever.
For sure.
Like, you meet people, like, you get perspective. Life is about perspective, and the more perspective you have, the better adjusted you become.
What we're saying is do a week in jail or a week in rehab. Or
go do a week in rehab, a week. If you want our life advice, do some rehab, do some jail time. No, it just gives you that life experience and that
48 hours
perspective.
in the 5150 cell.
60 days in, whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want to do.
60 days in, that's a fun show.
That's where Gilded Trash comes from.
That's exactly. Like that. So many people, some of the best people I met ever were... I generally, and I say this all the time because of my grandma, we were the type of people that rooted for the bad guys in the movies, just like they say in Goodfellas. We truly were. That bandit mentality of always working against the system. Whether that doesn't necessarily have to be drugs or anything like that,
right?
But where you're always trying to get one over on the man.
Right.
Like that sort of thing. And I don't mean the man like necessarily like the government.
Right.
But like... You're just you operate in a part of society that's not forgotten about, but sort of. You know what I mean? Like the underbelly. And being able to navigate, there's a lot of good, fun people in that world that are some of the best people you'll ever meet. The realest people. I say this all the time.
The realest people.
The realest people you'll ever meet are people like that.
I mean, you're going to meet some shysters too. And
100%.
But how are you going to know the difference between a shyster and somebody who's real and has experience without experience in both of them?
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And what it is it's a crash course. If you don't know and then you go to jail or something like that, you find out real quick. You learn very quickly. It's a very fast education process in the underworld of society.
Yeah.
Because they're hard lessons. They're not these little,
It's not a 6-week course on getting to learn your inner self.
Right.
It's fucking...
Yeah, you're not talking about your feelings.
No.
You're fucking going through it.
It's a street education.
Yeah, it's a street education. It's real quick. And
I feel lucky to have a balance of that. I mean, I think that part of growing up poor enabled me to have that street education on top of my, having a book education and all that. Like, I feel like it gives me insight into people that a lot of people
wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah, exactly.
You just don't. Yeah, you just don't have that perspective unless you.
And I'm still learning. I learned today that fire existed before forests did. I didn't know that.
Yeah, of course it did.
I thought humans invented fire. I didn't realize that it could just.
We discovered and harnessed the power of. We didn't invent.
Meanwhile,
fire.
I'm over here challenging people on social media to fucking IQ tests, and I didn't even know that fire was around since the beginning of time. Like I didn't.
Right. You just thought that humans made it.
I thought that humans
one day took 2 rocks and that was the first fire that ever was.
I really did.
Right. No.
Well, that tells you how broken the education system is.
Right. I mean, you think you would learn when fiery comets were bombarding the Earth for 4.5 million years that there was fires everywhere.
Sometimes I just, I don't know. In high school, I was fascinated with English.
I wish I was fascinated by anything in high school. Like, if I could go back now, I'd want to be a brainiac.
Well, I was a drama kid and a band nerd, a band geek. So, yeah, I mean, let's talk about our very first experiences ever. I think I smoked pot maybe for the very first time in my entire life when I was around 17-ish. In high school. I wasn't a pothead in high school, but I did smoke pot in high school, like my senior year. Not in the high school. Miss D, if you're listening, I didn't smoke in the high school. Oh, wait, maybe I did. Did any of us smoke in the auditorium up in the second floor?
Smoking in the Bo's room.
I remember when Chad came to school high as a kite on marijuana or no LSD and sat behind me in class and was tripping balls. Like,
I remember one time that I took a bunch of Ambien and drank wine and was rolling around the floor with the neighbor kid because we thought we were in a bowl of spaghetti.
Oh my god, I love it. I love it.
I mean, there's so many. So many ridiculous ones. I mean, none really come to mind though. But like, I mean, the first time I smoked, I remember where I was. I was working on a farm, and I was about 14, and we were eating watermelon and smoking weed on a hot summer day.
You and the Mexicans?
No, not a Mexican. Another kid my age.
I'm not being a smart ass. He did work on a farm.
He's a couple years old. No, I did work with a lot of Mexicans. They were always fascinated by drugs. They'd be like, they didn't speak any English, but they'd be like, cocaina? I'd be like, I'm 15 years old. And they'd be like, how much por pussy in Chambersburg? I'm like, I don't know. I never bought it. So, can't tell you, bub.
What about the first time I ever did LSD? I think I was 19.
Yeah, it was probably somewhere in that same.
It was right after. It was the summer after I had Anthony.
I watched a bunch of Scooby-Doo. Made a bunch of food that I didn't eat. But yeah, the main thing I remember was being really fast. I watched the movie Flubber.
That sounds fun.
But I just watched a bunch of movies because and it was just what was on VHS, at my friend's house. And he had younger brothers and sisters and stuff. So there was a bunch, mostly cartoon stuff and whatnot. But I remember I watched Scooby-Doo and Flubber. Not Scooby-Doo, the live action, but Scooby-Doo cartoons.
Right.
You know.
The first time I ever did it, me and my best friend went puddle jumping, and I can't say her name because she does a good job and I don't want to get her in trouble, but we went puddle jumping in the rain and ran around Sear Foss.
And the first time that I did mushrooms, I don't even know. when the first time I ate mushrooms was.
I know, I've done
Sometime
mushrooms
in
so many
there.
times I couldn't even tell
Probably in my early 20s. I did acid before I did mushrooms.
One of my most favorite mushroom trips in the last couple of years was when we watched Super Mario Brothers.
Super Mario's was great on mushrooms.
Fantastic. Because the visuals in that movie are already fantastic.
Yeah, mushrooms, you want a good visual.
Yeah.
A good visual representation. Also, the time that we sat down and watched Saturday Night Live reruns.
Ooh,
remember when we ate the chocolate bar, just laughing hysterically
Yes.
on old SNLs? All those old SNLs with, not old SNLs, but SNLs from like 2007 to like 2013.
Sudeikis.
When they had Jason Sudeikis, Andy Samberg, Kristen Wiig, all the Keenan.
The best cast
was still
ever.
in it. Yeah.
Arguably the best of like.
I can make the case to anybody that was the best cast.
Yeah, agree.
Bill Hader.
Agree. Oh God.
Will Forte.
Yeah.
That other guy that did MacGruber.
Mm-hmm.
There was just some, even that's what I'm saying, even the bad ones were good.
Right.
Like it wasn't
and
like
they've
that.
all been in stuff.
Yeah, they were hugely successful, but I think that about wraps it up though, don't you think? As far as...
All right, guys. That's a wrap on episode 8. And on episode 9, we are going to be bringing you all things Thanksgiving in our crazy ass
stuffing, families, turkeys, hunting traditions, sleeping traditions, football traditions, pie
Can't
traditions.
talk about Thanksgiving without the Macy's Day Thanksgiving Parade.
You can't talk about Thanksgiving without talking about Black Friday.
Ooh, that's a good one.
One of them.
I don't go to that. I don't participate in that ritual.
We don't either, but we'll still talk about it because when I was a child, I was frightened of Black Friday. It sounds like a very scary holiday. So
it does.
We'll get to that. Anyway, peace out.
Peace.
There's a dispensary in Cumberland, Maryland that we go to. It's called Grow West. That's a very good dispensary. It's the best dispensary. It's absolutely the best dispensary. I've never seen a dispensary better. No,
before you get into that, can we just say that while we were in the drive-thru the other week, we were talking about how if you took the customer service.
Oh yeah, the customer service, how happy the people are that work at weed shops. They're the friendliest people. If you took the customer service of weed shops mixed with the efficiency of a Chick-fil-A drive-thru system, you could conquer whatever business you're trying to be in.
Absolutely.
If you copy that model, you want your employees as happy as the people at the weed shop,
yes,
and as efficient as Chick-fil-A. Done.
Boom.
You're going to be successful.
That is the template for the best business.
Whatever you're doing.
Yes. Anyways, so back to your song. So
Grow West is a dispensary in Cumberland, Maryland. And the first time that I heard it, Toby Keith's song, Should Have Been a Cowboy, he says, "Go West, young man." And I thought of Grow West, young man. And I wrote this song about it. Should have been a pothead. I should have learned to smoke and drive. Packing my one hitter, getting real stoned on a mountain ride. Taking those big bone rips, just like Cheech and Chong. Singing those Willie Nelson songs. Oh, I should have been a pothead. I should have had my own strain with a funny name, running wild through the town, selling Mary Jane. Ended up in a bit of danger. Got my door kicked in by the Texas Rangers. Grow West, young man, haven't you been told? Our dispensary's filled with Acapulco gold.